when markets are booming or busting, there is always going to be a desire to retain talent. And so, organizations will do whatever it takes, sign-on bonuses, counteroffers. I've read that 70% of candidates who actually end up accepting a counteroffer end up looking for a job within 3 to 6 months after accepting that counteroffer.
In other words, it's a temporary fix. It's a Band-Aid.
Absolutely. And then, fast forward very quick, 3 to 6 months, they're back to square one, and the market conditions could be different then.
It's easy for us to say, just pay more and people won't leave. But there are so many other factors at play.
Things like job security, organizational structure, path to promotion. Those are the things you need to think about.
How are we guiding the companies that are making offers and the candidates who are considering offers to not consider counteroffers?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with
my conversation today is one of the most important topics in all of recruiting and talent. It is something that is always prevalent and something candidates, hiring teams, agencies, and internal recruitment teams alike need to always be aware of and in defense of. Counteroffers. My guest to talk about such an important topic is New York head of Selby Jennings, Ryan Mazza. He uses his 11 years of recruitment experience in financial services to delve into what candidates in the market, current employees, and hiring teams should be on the lookout for. One key takeaway for clients and candidates each: touch points and remembering why you are looking in the first place. Counteroffers, they never go out of season. They never go out of style, but they're a pain in the neck every time. And they're something that we always, always, always have to be vigilant of. Let's start with this. At the time of this recording, we're end of May here. Bonuses have been paid out for the most part. Financial year is in full swing. What is the status and the environment of counteroffers? Are we seeing them more prevalently than ever before? Are we seeing them as just kind of consistent as it's always been? Is market volatility leading to more of them, less of them? What's your current assessment of the market with regards to counteroffers?
Yeah, great question. I think, obviously to your point in the introduction, their counteroffers are ingrained into the workforce, right? And whether markets are booming or busting, counteroffers are embedded into every organization. The war for talent continues to be real. And, I think when markets are bearish, the reasons why people produce counteroffers are different than when they're bullish, right? I think obviously with the new administration stepping into office only about 6 or 7 months ago, we've seen a lot of volatility. A lot of our clients are performing incredibly well and do well when markets are as volatile as they have been. And so there's a lot of growth hiring taking place. And with that in mind, team members are looking to grow and scale. And the idea of losing a key team member is certainly a threat to the growth goals that organization may have. So
yes,
yeah, they continue to be rampant and they are consistently happening across all the markets we cover here across Selby Jennings.
And would you say that they're happening at a certain level? Is it agnostic? They're happening, firms are looking to retain anybody whatsoever, or is it more senior? What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that, as employees, gain tenure on the street and, hit the levels of, senior associate and VP and director and executive director and managing director, the impact of a loss like that will certainly dramatically be felt to an organization in comparison to an analyst that may be, leaving an organization. So of course, the more senior team members that they go in to resign, that the chances of a counteroffer become more and more real. But, all that being said, you never know it's kind of different for every organization. The impact of one analyst and a team of 3 could actually be quite large, right? The impact of an executive director leaving a team with 5 EDs and a number of senior VPs that are up and coming, maybe it's the case that organization may not feel that blow. So yeah, I think it's case by case, dependent on team size and structure and a kind of tenure of the breakdown of that existing team.
You had mentioned that it's kind of rampant across all subsectors in financial services that we support. Is there anything that stands out to you with regards to markets? If obviously a little bit more senior, but are we seeing it happen more in revenue generating areas than non-investment, or the other way around? Or again, is it just kind of, it's everywhere?
Yeah, I think, listen, at the end of the day, those individuals that are in roles that are generating revenue, whether they're, on the sell side working in a trading seat or successful portfolio manager at a big multi-manager, obviously those are money makers, and they, teams will do whatever it takes and really roll out the red carpet to retain that top talent for obvious reasons. So yes, of course, I think that the frequency of counter offers because is higher the closer you get to the market, and the closer you get to the front office and revenue generating roles. Absolutely.
Yeah. I know that from our position as well, something that we've noticed is even if it's support roles, whether it's technology or desk quants that aren't doing quant trading themselves, uh, especially on the hedge fund side, it seems like it's just an automatic. It's a given. When we generate an offer, we have to temper our excitement because we almost can't even consider it done until the counteroffer phase is over, and that's highly specific, at least right now in our world, highly specific to hedge fund clients. It happens a bit more with the senior banking related clients, but just share your thoughts on kind of those support roles in counteroffers on the hedge fund side, and maybe why you think it's getting more and more and more competitive.
Yeah, listen, I think anecdotally, we just had head of SRE started a large multi-manager and moved them from one multi-manager to another multi-manager. And I think it was maybe 3 or 4 weeks of back and forth counteroffer from the existing employer with another counteroffer from the prospective employer. And, for top talent, specifically in the tech world, and, you think about the top performing multi-managers, especially in an economic environment like we're in, it's more competitive than ever. There's significant, quarterly earnings that have been posted already, I think notably over the course of the last few weeks across big name multi-managers. And, that war for talent is real, and they'll do what it takes to keep their top team members. And, it's as expected. As I mentioned, earlier, it's when markets are booming or busting, there is always going to be a desire to retain talent. Having a loss of a key team member can dramatically hold a business back. And so, organizations will do whatever it takes: sign-on bonuses, counter offers, increase, promoting individuals, promising title progression, et cetera. They'll throw the kitchen sink at individuals that are really key team members in order to keep them employed at their current organization.
Which kind of brings up my next point or my next question of, what are we seeing? What do the counter offers look like? It's obviously always money first, but sometimes flexibility, sometimes equity or shares, or, depending on what it is. Is there anything, are there patterns that you're seeing there? Or like you say, is it just the kitchen sink? Whatever they can do to retain, companies are doing it these days.
Yeah. I mean, listen, the recruiter in me is always seeking to listen twice as much as you speak. And I think, any intelligent manager who's dealing with a counter offer should, speak with anyone who's resigning to really understand what motivated them to resign first off, and then think critically about how they can realistically get creative to provide that individual with what they feel is lacking from their current kind of progression within an organization or from their current compensation within an organization. So I think, that would be my advice to employers who may be experiencing resignations is to listen to team members about why they may be leaving, and then actually, aim to drive positive change and see if you can get creative to, retain that person by listening to their feedback. And if it's the case that you can't, you should certainly, hold that feedback in high regard. If that individual is leaving for those specific reasons, it's very likely that other people on your team are maybe feeling the same thing. So it's important you collect that feedback and implement it to your current work structure. But, I definitely think that the kitchen sink is probably the best way to holistically, kind of describe how to, how organizations are trying to keep their top players.
You bring up a great point there. And, something that we try and advise and consult on often, right, is employee experience, right? When it's the interview, it's the candidate experience, but once they work for you, it's the employee experience. And, I think, like you say, that's a great point around applying the feedback in exit interviews or what have you, but retention tactics are so important to just try to avoid this. And look, it's easy for us to say, just pay more and people won't leave. Just pay more and people will accept your offers and not be enticed to want to leave. But there are so many other factors at play, some qualitative topics, some unique or subjective issues that, like you say, if managers are a little bit more aware of or partner with their internal HR or recruiting teams to try and, whether it's a culture thing or try and, create an environment that makes people want to stay and not consider, other things like that, or other factors that would entice them to leave. These are all really good in retention tactics that can maybe make a counteroffer less threatening.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that that's the case. And listen, I think, things like job security can, come to mind, organizational structure, path to promotion, projects that individuals are working on, increased scope of work, increased scope of responsibility, someone feeling
Yes.
challenged in a role. Those are the things that you need to think about outside of just cash is king. And if you pay people a lot, they'll be happy, they'll be content, and they'll work hard. And that's not always the case. That's for most people, that actually isn't always the number one factor. It may not even be the number two factor. So it's really important to understand the motivations of your team members if you're going to actually aim to retain them and then help have them progress and then have a long tenure at your organization within your team.
And creating a culture of learning and collaboration and what have you. Those are such good points. And, like you say, I think money motivation is one thing, but it might not always be everything or the only thing. So really good points there. Now, just to kind of close it out and flip the conversation to the candidate side of things or the employee side of things, what advice are we giving candidates? And what is something that candidates should be aware of or employees should be aware of, and why counteroffers can be dangerous or harmful or risky for their careers? And how are we guiding the companies that are making offers and the candidates who are considering offers to not consider counteroffers?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with how we're guiding our clients and how to ensure their prospective hires are not accepting counteroffers. And I think the most successful clients that we have, remain on the offensive with the relationships that they build with a candidate from not only the first round interview, not only from the second round interview, third round interview, final round interview, and then once the ink's dry on the paperwork, but they develop a relationship with that individual for the entirety of that first impression that they make in the first interview, all the way up until the first day that they start an organization.
Absolutely.
Right. I think a lot of clients miss the mark when they expect a signature, and certainly within the kind of STEM talent that we recruit, a lot of the talent that we recruit have visa transfers that may take up to 30 or 60 days. Plus, in addition to that, there's obviously notice periods for 30, 60, 90. People have non-competes for up to 18 months in some instances. And, if you ghost the talent that you're trying to attract, I think, recency bias is a very real thing. And I think prospective team members can completely forget about their interest in the role. Right. And, I think those organizations and those team leads that take the extra step to reach out to the candidate the day they're going to resign and say, hey, I know this is probably not going to be a positive conversation. Just wanted to reassure you, we're so excited to have you on board. And maybe says, we have a team drinks next week. We'd love to have you come on board and meet the team and meet the group in a more social setting and get you ingrained. It's those extra gestures that make people feel like they're making the right decision, right? Outside of team drinks, I think those team members and team leads that, share projects and maybe textbooks or market-related intel with those team members and kind of drip feed that throughout someone's notice period or throughout someone's non-compete period or visa transfer period. It's a way to stay engaged, right? And it's a way to remind team members as to why they're looking to prospective team members and why they're looking to make a move. And you got to be cognizant of the fact that after that ink is dry, they may have to go into work for a week, a month, 60 days. And that's a face-to-face interaction they're having with the manager who they've worked with for many, many years in some cases. And they may, teeter the other way because of that interaction that they're having. And so again, that recency bias is very real. And I think the more touch points you can have, the more thoughtful you can be about keeping that contact from the day that someone, signs to join your team up until they start is absolutely critical.
Couldn't have said it better. And if anyone's going to take anything away from this conversation, it's about touch points and the onboarding experience. And to tie it to the conversation from earlier, right? Like sometimes we lose a candidate because they just were paid more and they felt comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they got cold feet, and sometimes they're comfortable in the role that they were in and they were maybe only moving for one specific reason, and the counteroffer kept them there because that counteroffer is happening, as you say, in real time, in person. So avoiding that is just more touch points, more onboarding experience, positive onboarding experience. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's such an important takeaway.
Yeah, I think make that team member feel like they're already part of the team before they even start, right? The more you can make someone feel valued and onboarded and integrated, the more successful the chances will be that they successfully start and that they have a positive onboarding experience. And you should want your team members to start on the right foot and have a positive impression. You can only make that impression once. So would highly advise, team leads to be thoughtful and strategic about implementing that.
That's a really good point you make as well. It doesn't have to just be the HR or BD or recruiting teams, right? The hiring manager reaching out, and even if it's just a text message, right? Once a week, even, if you can't meet in person, if you're traveling or something else, if you're busy, just contact. And touch points like that from the incoming hiring manager could be really, really beneficial.
Absolutely. We just made a pretty notable placement, and that individual is sitting out a non-compete right now. And this was actually prior to them resigning and getting the formal package. But the client that we were supporting found out that the prospective candidate was going to be traveling in Europe. And that manager took it upon himself to say, hey, I know you'll be traveling here on vacation and also for a little bit of work. And if you've got time to meet this other stakeholder in the UK while you're there for a coffee or for a drink, he'd love to meet you. And it was a more social, casual environment. And when that individual came back from their trip, they gave me a ring and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that you weren't looped in on this, but it made me feel like they really want me. It made me feel like I would be added value to the team. It made me feel like I'm already part of the team. And
that
smaller gestures that can go such a long way. And I think a lot of clients, understandably so, aren't thinking about it. Our clients have job functions and organizations they're looking to build and strategies that they're looking to implement. And so it may not be the forefront of their mind on a daily basis. And with that said, it's so important. If you are holding that higher and higher regard and you really are, it's a strategic investment, make sure that you are giving it the TLC that you need in order to successfully make it to the finish line and get that key team member on board.
Out of sight, out of mind is so real in this instance, especially as you say, if they are continuing to show up to work for 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days. That's the opposite of outside of mind, or out of sight, out of mind internally, right? So those touch points, I love that example. I know it's your holiday, but if you want to come say hello, that just further drives the point home. So yeah, that's really good stuff. Anything to close on what else we might be advising candidates on? That's kind of the client side.
I've not been in a situation where I've had to go in and resign myself, but obviously coached hundreds, if not thousands of candidates to go through those conversations, and they're never fun, right? No one's going to take care of your career more than yourself. And I think that's something I always, aim to reiterate to the candidates that we're coaching and consulting throughout the process. And you've got to be selfish. You have to be selfish for their career. You've got to take care of it. If you are looking to make a move, there's a reason why you were looking to make a move. And if you've invested all that time for an interview process and to get to the finish line, stay dedicated to it, right? I think it's easy to, at the nth hour, think about how is this going to change my commute? How is this going to change my hours? How is this going to impact my spouse or my children? And, this is also easy. I'm in a routine. I've been here for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, what have you. I don't want to rock my world. I'm getting cold feet. But, it's easy to get distracted by a comfortable situation. And I don't have the exact statistic, but I've read that there, 70% of candidates who actually end up accepting a counteroffer end up looking for a job within 3 to 6 months after accepting that counteroffer.
In other words, it's a temporary fix. It's a Band-Aid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, fast forward very quick, 3 to 6 months, they're back to square one, and the market conditions could be different then, right? It's not to say that they're guaranteed to be able to get a new job in that 3 to 6 month period when they're aiming to look again. A lot of the time, they may have closed the door with that organization that offered them because they got that far in the process and then they signed the offer letter and then they banked on it. A lot of organizations don't really, swallow that well, as they shouldn't. A lot of, time and effort went into a candidate's, onboarding experience. So, I would just aim to coach team member or candidates rather to really be thoughtful, right? Really be thoughtful with the decision and make sure that after the first round interview, after the second round interview, that you're speaking with whatever individuals, spouses, and outside influences are going to help you make that decision. I think, naively, a lot of, candidates sometimes go through a whole entire interview process and get to offer stage without speaking to anybody that in their personal life it's going to impact. And that also, I think, sometimes can throw a wrench into things and lead to a counteroffer at the nth hour. Making a move in your career is a massive decision. one of the top 5 to definitely top 7 decisions you ever make in your life are the career changes that you make. And so it's really important that you are thoughtful, that you're selfish, and that you stick to your guns, right? You were looking to make a job change for a reason, and don't get distracted by an easy, comfortable situation.
Great advice. And again, such good points. We do it here a lot, right? Remember your why. So it's easy kind of to forget that once the situation might change, or once the process is ongoing, or if there are lags or whatever. Oh, maybe I am a little comfortable. Remember why you were looking in the first place. If you take a counteroffer, is the culture really going to change in 3 to 6 months, like you say? If somebody doubles their compensation, okay, well, we have a hard time with that one, right? But are the intrinsic challenges that we're pushing you to consider this anyway really going to change if you're accepting counteroffers or considering counteroffers in a short amount of time?
Absolutely. And I also think that, once you do accept a counteroffer, of course, then you got to walk into work the next day, right? After telling your manager, I don't like working,
I'm out of here,
go somewhere else. And then you think, actually, I'm going to stay. I'll take that counteroffer. Now you have to sheepishly walk in, on eggshells back into the office every day. All of your team members, all the internal stakeholders that you support know that you tried to quit and now you're staying. And I think the impression and the relationship that you have with those key stakeholders you're rubbing elbows with every day naturally is different. Your manager will view you differently when and if, cuts happen or there's any type of budget constraints and they may need to look at cuts. The first person that they're going to look at is the individual who maybe raised their hand and said 6 months ago, I actually want to leave, I'm going somewhere else, and then took a counteroffer. Well, you already indicate that's easy. That's an easy conversation for a manager to have. You told us 6 months ago you wanted to leave. We got to slim down the team. So,
here you go.
Here you go. Here's your chance, right? So, I think that's something to keep in mind as well. And it's certainly from a job security perspective, it's not the most strategic move. It really, really isn't. And which is why we always advised, candidates to never progress to that stage and make that mistake.
Some really insightful points, valuable insight, and valuable nuggets of information that you've shared, both for clients who are onboarding talent, looking to retain talent, as well as for what candidates should be looking out for. And to bring the whole conversation full circle, something we discussed, right? There is no off season for counteroffers. So
right.
Just because you're looking in a certain month doesn't mean, maybe I'm not going to get one because bonuses were just paid, or maybe I'm not going to get one because it's the holiday season. They are always around, and candidates should and current employers should always be expecting that every offer they extend to anyone who's currently employed is going to result in a counteroffer. So something for us to close on there. So brilliant stuff. Thank you for the insights. Thank you for your 10, 11 years of recruitment experience in this field. The perfect person to talk to about it. Thanks for being on.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
That's all for today's episode of Searching Smarter. If you found this conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until next time, keep searching smarter.